inshallah it makes sense. Obviously I know that I do not owe anybody an explanation, but I do think that I want to share my personal insight because I've seen what the internet has done to girls who've removed their hijab, and I'm not afraid of sharing my insight, so I'm going to give you guys exactly that. Now, to give you a little bit of context about myself, my name is Sophie. I'm 23 years old. I am of Mexican ethnicity, American nationality. Spanish is my first language, English is my second. I became Muslim 7 years ago. I wore the hijab for the past 3 years. I was married, I had a son, I got divorced, and now obviously the big shocker to the internet is that I have removed my hijab. It's very difficult, almost impossible to give you guys exactly a reason why. I don't think there is a reason why I removed my hijab. It's kind of just a bunch of different factors and reasons as to why I decided to make this decision. Before I give you the reasons why, I'm going to give you a little more context just because I feel like everything in my life has been a certain way for a reason. I come from a Catholic and Christian background, predominantly Catholic. I come from a very practicing family, very religious family, and I know I've said that I've had a tough childhood many times before, but I've never given much context as to why, other than the fact that my dad passed when I was 11. That story is a very tragic, traumatizing one. My dad lived in Mexico. My dad was my best friend. He was my first love. So obviously growing up without a dad was challenging. I was raised by a single mother along with my 2 sisters, and I grew up, with a very hardworking mom who, she had to make ends meet, so she was always working, wouldn't be able to attend, like the school things. Because I didn't have my mom or my dad at home, I ultimately ended up relying on my friends and the people at school, my teachers, my peers. That obviously led to not having a solid foundation at all. Throughout my teenage years, middle school and high school, a lot of very awful things started happening to me, again, because I felt like I didn't know where to run. I felt like I had nowhere to go to. Obviously, the people that I would count on and rely on would ultimately backstab me and do awful things to me. So looking back at all the tragedies that happened to me during my teenage years, I obviously understand now that none of that was my fault, because growing up it felt like everything was my fault, and there was a lot of shame in everything that happened to me. I was 17 years old when I found Islam, and when I found Islam I was in a very dark place. I was living in a lot of shame over things that weren't my fault but I thought were my fault. And I was living in a very, very, very dark and ugly place. And Islam was my escape. Islam is what literally saved me. When you become Muslim, you basically become like a baby. Like, you have a clean slate. And that is exactly what I needed at the time. When I was first learning about Islam, I did not transition towards Islam very smoothly. It was a quick, sudden, and drastic change that I made in my life, in my mindset, and everything else. So obviously this caused an identity crisis. And for Islamic reasons, this is wrong because the Quran itself was revealed over so many years for a reason, okay? I rushed into hijab when I first became Muslim. I ended up taking it off. I had only worn it for 7 months. I took it off, went like 2 years without it, and then I put it back on, and I wore it for these past 3 years. And a lot of very difficult things happened to me these past 3 years. Things that I will not be speaking on out of respect because it involves other people. But it was very difficult. I had to start going to therapy during my pregnancy. I pretty much knew my relationship was going to be over the day after I found out that I was pregnant. Okay, so I obviously tried my best to make it work. I gave the relationship my everything, went to therapy to heal myself, to be able to handle everything. Because again, I had a child in my womb, so I'm trying to process a lot of things. I ended up getting divorced 3 months after my son is born, and I moved back with my family. Okay, this entire time I'm wearing hijab. Now my life at this point feels like a lie. It feels like I have almost lost this sense of reality because of everything that I went through. It was just like thing after the other, after the other, after the other, piling up. I could not breathe. Up to this point, it feels like I have had no certain identity. I've kind of been all over the place my entire life. From the time I was born, to the time my dad passed away, to the time we moved to America, to the time that I'm relying on my friends and my peers, to when I become Muslim, and then I get married, and then I get divorced, and then I'm trying to rediscover myself with all of these Islamic principles while living with my Mexican family back at square one. However, the difference now is that at this point, obviously everything that I have been through has made me stronger, especially because I have a son now, right? And hijab was always hard for me. It was always difficult. Obviously, being the only one in your family who practices a completely different faith is challenging. Now, to be wearing the hijab and to be completely devoted to the hijab is a whole other level of challenge and difficulties. Not only was it extremely difficult to maintain my hijab because I am the only Muslim in my family, but also because I'm building a bunch of different foundations all on my own. Not just when it comes to Islam, but a whole bunch of other things. So because I've been carrying all of this weight for so long, and I'm trying to rediscover myself after divorce, without the protection of a husband, without the protection of a father figure, of any man in my life really, I have to take steps to make myself the best person, human being, and mother that I can be. And for many reasons, including safety, that meant removing my hijab. But I do want to make it known that I will continue being Muslim, inshallah. I will continue learning about Islam. I will continue to take it day by day. And everything that I've shared online has been real. It has only been snippets, mainly positive moments. I will continue to spread love.